Tonight, this evening, we are privileged to have Mr. Gene Duvernoy to present a very interesting study to us and the finding of that. I asked, should I pronounce his name the French way or the English way? And I was told, please pronounce it the way it's pronounced in the United States. So here it is. Gene Duvernoy is president of Forterra, a nonprofit that secures the keystone places for a sustainable and equitable Pacific Northwest. With deep expertise in real estate and relationship building, Forterra so far completed 400 land deals in 90 communities around Washington, securing remote wildlands, working farms, and city parks and open space. Under Gene's leadership, the organization is also pursuing land for affordable and vibrant urban neighborhoods, recognizing that population pressure are likely to grow, whether because of economy, climate change, or both. Forterra's fundamental conviction is that people and land truly thrive only when they thrive together. And this is something that you see in action, and all the projects that they do is the running theme of the work of Forterra. A founder of Forterra, Gene has guided the organization more than 2 decades, which means he is tenacious. He also serves on the advisory board of the University of Washington for the College of Environment. In addition, he is on the board of directors for the Friends of Waterfront Seattle and the Marine Conservation Institute. Prior to Forterra, Gene held position in government, research, public policy, and law. He received a BS in civil engineering and public affairs from Carnegie Mellon University and an MBA and a JD from Cornell University. Please help me welcome Mr. Gene Duvernoy.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Whether you should pronounce my name in the French or English way, I have to tell you all that about 20 years ago, I was thrilled to go back to France to see the town where my grandparents came from, Venois. And I was still debating whether to pronounce my name the French or English way, and I went to Venois, and I saw it was the one homely place in France. So I'm all American, guys. It's all American. Ali mentioned that I've been working at Forterra for 20 years, and Ali was very kind to say that meant that I was quite tenacious. It also means I'm getting a lot of gray hair and a little bit creaky in the knees, and so that's just, that's part of having the fun and being with an organization this length of time. What I'd like to do tonight is first introduce Forterra very quickly so we get some grounding in who we are, and then talk about the reasons for this research and what we heard, which I think is quite interesting, and then end with how Forterra is responding and sort of challenge us all to sort of think about how we respond to this information to make this region really gloriously sustainable and livable. So with that, I'll get on with it. So, okay, Forterra. We've been around, like Ali said, for 25 years. And over that time, we've done 400 real estate transactions. And those are transactions from very high ground in the mountains to deep urban city center. And over that time, we learned a few things anyway. And that's that real estate is not unidimensional. That when we do our real estate, we really need to think of it in a portfolio way. If we're really going to be a resilient community, we need to invest in real estate, realizing there's not just natural implications and not just about the critters, but there's economic implications to all of our real estate and social cohesion implications. So Forterra, as you'll see as we talk, has really developed this quite broad view of what we're about and how we create a resilient community through real estate. And there's social components and economic or built components and natural components. So, again, I'm going to talk to you about why we did this research, how we did it real quickly, and then what we learned. So you all recognize this, right? It's right outside Tacoma. You see Tacoma in the background there? And it's glorious farmland right now. And that provides ecosystem services, recreation, food choices. I suspect we all want to see it continue to work as farmland. And not that this will happen, and certainly not that it should happen, but over 30, 40, 100 years, things could change. And you could wind up with something like this, which serves none of us. Those are expensive communities to serve. They're not very dense. They're very expensive in terms of consumption, and so there's got to be a better way, right? Well, the better way, I think, and we think, the better way is to create concentrated magnets for growth, where we grow in these concentrated areas and let the rest of our landscape function as it should. So who knows what concentrated magnets for growth are? Who knows what they are? Cities. Yeah, so we have the answer right in front of us. Cities. How do we make our, you go to the front of the class. How do we make our cities, really thrive? And how do we build our cities? Well, that requires a social license. If we don't maintain the social license with our citizens to grow our cities, there's ultimately going to be pressure to continue to sprawl. So what Forterra said is, we need to understand how our citizens are considering growth now, why we're vibrant, why we're strong. Let's touch base with how our citizens are looking at growth. So we really take a baseline, understand how they're reacting to growth, and respond in a way that we continue to maintain that social license to grow in our cities. So that was the reason behind this research. And you best do that kind of research when you're strong. We're a growing region. International capital is flowing into this region. This is the time when you want to cement that social license to grow in our cities. You don't want to wait till you're in a state of disrepair. Where in Detroit, you have 40% of its land base delinquent. How does it turn itself around with that kind of drag? So let's look at how our citizens are looking at growth today, when there are a lot of cranes around, if you will, and make sure we really respond to their thinking. So that's why we did it. How we did it and who we did it with comes up next. We secured partners to help develop and fund this research from the Puget Sound Regional Council, a regional governmental group, King County Council, and Amazon. Amazon and South Lake Union really needs to understand how citizens are looking at growth. We used a firm to do this research, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, called Hearts and Minds Strategies, which has delved into how citizens are looking at their regions and how their regions are growing across the country, 30 different jurisdictions. Before they were Hearts and Minds Strategies, they were Worthland Associates. And as some of you know that name, it sounds like, they were President Reagan's public research organization. So they really know how to dive deep into how citizens are looking at issues. We conducted about 650, I think it's 647, intensive interviews with respondents across this 4-county area, Snohomish, King, Pierce, and Kitsap. About 650 interviews. And they were 20 minutes long, really long, 20 to 25 minutes long. Way longer than you would typically expect a survey to be. We probed really deep because it wasn't on the phone. We used the internet, and through a computer interaction, we were really able to spend time with the respondents and really understand how they were thinking about growth. And I think the reactions are really worthy of paying attention to. So here's, okay, so that's a little bit of who we are, a little bit of why we did this research, and how we did it, and now I want to talk to you about what we learned. And then I'll talk to you about what Forterra is doing about it. So here's what we learned. And before I tell you anything, the research also was surprising to me because it was very uniform in its response. Geographically, the responses didn't change. The responses from citizens in Snohomish County were very close to the responses of citizens in Pierce, King, or Kitsap. Demographically, the responses weren't very different either. Geographically and demographically, the responses were very much the same. We have I can never say this word. We have residents who are very uniform in their reactions to growth. There's not a lot of difference of opinion, which is exceptional and different from any other part of the country, to my understanding. So first, we have an incredibly optimistic group of residents, much more so than anywhere else in the country. So we have a reservoir of optimism and goodwill in our region to build on. And if you look at these two bar charts, on a measure of 0 to 10, our citizens have a positive outlook of 7.2, which is statistically quite significant above this national average of 6.1. And half of us believe it's only going to get better. So we are not down at the heels in terms of our attitude. We're residents who are ready to sort of grapple with the future. That's good news. That is very good news. If you look at a measure of optimism, whether you think we're on the right track or wrong track, there was some geographical differentiation. And what you should be delighted to see is you're the most optimistic bunch. That you really believe we're on the right track by 48%. And then Snohomish is the ones that are a little bit queasy about what's going on here. And we don't have the research really that dove in behind what those geographic differences are. We wonder whether it's the way growth is happening in these different counties, but we need to go back out in the field and really probe that one deeper to see what might be behind that difference of optimism. So here's, I think this is a very important point. It's a very important point for decision makers, for elected officials, for all of us who are working with the public. 73% of us are very interested, self-professed, great interest in local issues, growth issues and local issues. That's a very high number. 62% of us consider ourselves very informed about those issues. So we're nobody's fool. What we take from this slide is that it's a mistake to speak at us, which I might be doing tonight, I apologize. It's a real mistake to speak at the public. We need to speak with the public and have a conversation and take them, assume that they are very informed and intelligent level. And so you see that mistake all the time of folks speaking at the public than rather having a conversation with. And I think this slide cautions us on that. When we ask about the quality of life overall in our region, despite all the growth, despite all the other economic issues and all the challenges in our region, by a factor of 3 to 1, we love living here. We have a very positive outlook on our region. So we have a reservoir of goodwill. There is a strong social license, if you look at this, to sort of continue to grow the way we're growing. Let's just not squander that. We don't need to turn it around. We need to enforce it. Reinforce it, rather. So that's the sort of sense of how we're feeling right now as a group of citizens across this region. Other than that, right track, wrong track, very uniform geographically and demographically. So we now are going to dive a little deeper and talk about growth specifically with respect to how our citizens are feeling about its impact on their lives. And we're pretty pragmatic. 80% of us believe growth is inevitable, and it's coming our way, and that we best plan and get ready for it. So unlike, if you're familiar with the CAP initiative, which I don't remember what it stands for, but the CAP initiative in Seattle about 20, 30 years ago, where it was really an effort to stop growth, citizens today recognize that it's just coming our direction. So very pragmatic compared to 20 years ago. I think this slide was one of the most interesting slides that came out of the research. And that 54% of our citizens, again, despite all the economic challenges, the frustrations with traffic, the cranes in some neighborhoods, 54% of us believe that growth should be encouraged, that it can be fashioned to serve them and their families, their communities. 17% undecided. They're not sure that they like growing in cities quite the way we are right now. They're undecided. And then 30 or 29%, they're really opposed to the way we are forming ourselves, the way we're creating our cities. So if, in fact, we want to maintain a social license to conserve our environment external of our cities and continue to grow our cities, it's this 54 plus 17%, which, if I do my math right, is 71%, right? That 71% is providing us, or we need to reinforce their expectations of how we grow and the benefits of how we grow if we're going to maintain our social license to grow in our cities. So we need to focus and justify their belief in, focus on what their concerns are and justify their belief in how we're acting as a region. So with that sense of we're optimistic, we're willing to extend our social license to continue to grow in our cities. Let's take it to the next step down to say, okay, what do you really like and not like, and what do we do about responding to your concerns? So we're diving deeper into the thinking of our citizens. So the first question was, what are your real personal priorities? Not how do you feel about the region, but what do you really like about this place and what's vexing? And this slide's surprising because it's totally unsurprising. We could have done this slide 6 months ago in a dark closet, right, and come up with almost these answers. Traffic congestion, transportation, right? Biggest concern we had out there. People are tired of the traffic. How many of you had trouble getting here today because of traffic? All right, there's some hands. Hi, Terry, thanks for coming. Next one, high cost. We are seeing that that growth is pushing us out of our neighborhoods. Now, you got to couple those with what we love, and here's a message. There's a serious message here, because here's what we love. And I'm going to interrupt myself a minute, because what is behind this, not just this research, Forterra conducted 30 structured interviews, 30 focus groups around the region, Tacoma, Seattle, with members of El Centro de la Raza, union members, high-tech executives, folks in Shelton, 30 focus groups to really delve into all this. And so some of what you're hearing from me tonight comes from those focus groups too. All those focus groups universally brought up these as the four top matters to discuss. So traffic, high cost of living, everyone loves living here because of the beauty. Unlike anywhere else in the country, we're all here because of the environment. And that came through every focus group, and I don't care which one, and that was strong across all of our responses, demographically, geographically. People love this region, the beauty of this region. They also love their communities. They love living in their communities, the diversity of their communities, the convenience, the shopping, their neighbors. Those numbers were stronger than any other part of this country. Their support for their communities and their love for the region. So couple this all together, as we heard in our focus groups. Folks are getting very frustrated about traffic and congestion because it's getting in the way of enjoying the outdoors and getting around their communities. That's vexing. That's a problem. It's one we all know. But the more serious issue, I submit, is folks are really worried that they're going to get priced out of their communities that they love so much, and that they're actually going to get priced out of the region with the outdoors that they love so much. So that's serious. That's something we need to think about and start to continue to have a discussion of how we address that issue. So we have a social license to continue to grow. Folks love this place, they love their communities, but there are two strong issues we're hearing that we best all pay attention to: traffic and transit and affordability. I missed the slide. Did I miss the slide? No. Okay, so now we know how they're thinking about growth, particularly in the issues that they love or are very disturbed about. We're starting to explore how to sort of address those issues next. And this slide is very important too. 82% of our residents are hungry for a sort of sense of direction, vision for where this region is going in terms of growth. 72% say they're not hearing it. They don't think there's a sort of unified approach. So for a guy who spends a lot of time with different government agencies and has a high regard for what's going on, that mystified me at first. Because I thought we were, from sound transit to other issues, I thought we were really grappling with these issues, as well as humans can. But here's what I think this slide, the message of this slide, is that first of all, the public is not asking for a 700-page plan, with chapters and appendices. That's not what they want. They wouldn't read it anyway, I wouldn't. But what they want is a sort of cohesive sense of direction. Where are we headed as a region and with growth? And the problem is, I think, that they're not hearing that common vision. They hear it differently from Forterra and other non-government organizations. They hear it differently from universities and other institutions. They hear it different from government, and they hear it different from business and chambers. So they hear all these different new talks about how we're going as a region, and they don't add up. They conflict. So it's not cutting through all the other noise out in the blogosphere and the media. It is best that all of us get together, all these institutions and interest groups who want to see us grow within our cities, and get on the same page for how we talk about this with our citizens. So we start reinforcing this common and developing a sense of common vision rather than inadvertently conflicting with each other. So I think there's some substance to this message. We're not doing well at all. This slide, we're not doing well at all in transit and affordability. I think there's just some fact that when you're in a fast growth area, you can never really keep up with a strong vision, but I think there's a big message here about how we're messaging such a vision and that we're all talking about growth differently. And we all need to get on the same page. So our citizens are right. I mean, our citizens are consistent. They know what they want. And when we start to ask them, okay, we heard you're worried about transportation, we heard you're worried about housing, and you want to see your strong communities continue, and you want to continue to enjoy the outdoors. Well, how do we really address growth? And if you look at the 6 top strategies, it's all about those 4 issues. It's about transportation, affordability, the outdoors, and their communities. So we're here, I mean, any way you probe this, what our citizens want, I mean, they know what they want. So we have to really pay attention to that. When you really get down to the granular level, it's the same voice as in the aspirational level. Okay? So that's, now I'm going to sort of talk to you about how we start engaging and improving our conversation with residents on growth. How do we talk to them about growth? So we now understand what they're thinking about it and what they expect in terms of regional performance. How do we have this conversation so that we're heard with all the other chatter out there? Well, words do matter. When we start to say, how do we even describe ourselves, and we start talking to our citizens about this region, and they know we're talking about this region, we tested probably 30 different names to self-describe this region for the conversation with our citizens. And the best one was Pacific Northwest. So we use that in all of our language now. We talk about being members of the Pacific Northwest community, and we're going to stick with that. That's the term that folks best identify with. We, through a lot of different testing within the surveys, we developed a lexicon, if you will, of words that cut through the chatter that folks pick up and listen hard to. And that's on our website. You can look at all and those are words that tested that resonate with people either pro or con, but they'll hear it through all the other noise. So we know what words to use when we're trying to communicate with our citizens. Oh, that's a good question. It has come up before. I am sorry that has no significance whatsoever, other than just distinguishing, you know. And this is all on our website, so sorry to mention it. And then, hey, this is really good. We're in the Pacific Northwest. We come from this tradition and heritage of collaboration in this region, and they want to know we're all in this together, that we're all trying to improve this place, that we're all concerned about how to make this region together. So they want, and it really resonates with our citizens when we talk about this being a collective effort, if I can use that term, collective, that we're all in this trying to improve this place together. So there is language to use to cut through the noise, to really have a good conversation with your citizens. If we can sell Coke on matching Coke up to the aspirations of their consumers, we can have meaningful conversations about growth by really matching the benefits or challenges of growth with the aspirations of our citizens. Now that sounds like mumbo jumbo, I know, but let me explain. We went through, after we learned what concerned our citizens and learned the words to use, we said, okay, how do we really talk about resolving these problems of growth in a way that makes sense to our residents, in a way it really fundamentally connects with their residents. Because I will tell you that saying that we need denser cities doesn't work. You know, right? Dense communities, walkable communities. You know, it's just sorry for any of you people in urban planning, but it doesn't connect. Folks, you talk about dense, the last time they ever did concern about density, we need high density. Last time folks worried about density was maybe in chemistry in 10th grade when they got D's. So we don't have the language, and we need that language. So what we did was, with this firm, which has done this around the country, was start to map up what some responses to growth can be and map those through a series of levels of the way we think about ourselves. And I'll explain this in a minute. From sort of the tactical attributes of what we think we need to do to the direct benefits of action, up to how, if we do that action, what are the emotional feelings that we all have from seeing those actions, up to the highest values we have, up to our highest aspirations of members of society. So we can have conversations that connect Sound Transit 3 to how we feel about being a parent to our kids. It's the way, again, it's the way that Coke has been making me buy far too many bottles of Coke for too long, so let's talk to our citizens this way too. So we started with attributes, and you can see those here. We worked up to various first-order benefits, and this was all tested through some very elaborate work on the computer. There's a lot of background to this. I'm giving you top line. And then from up there, we went up to how do you, if you stay in your community, if cost of living, affordable housing, let me do this. If we manage the cost of living, there's more affordable housing so you can stay in your community. What does that mean for you? Less stress, improves your quality of life. And finally, did I get there? No. And finally, it improves your well-being and sense of happiness. So through a lot of different ways of talking to our respondents on the computer, we were able to develop these mind maps, which were built on the mind maps, the emotional maps, if you will, which were built on the emotional maps this firm had done with these 30 other jurisdictions. So there's a lot of information going into this. Look how you use this. If you look at traffic, for instance, and infrastructure improvements, you can really see how we can start to talk to our citizens in a way that when they're really busy, going to 3 soccer teams with their kids, they can really hear what we say, maybe on some infrastructure improvements to improve traffic and how that ultimately will play out to them. Let me show you. I can tell you guys aren't taking this yet. All right, so we're going through first several different levels. Traffic congestion, not enough public investment. So perhaps what we're saying is we're going to invest. We're going to do Sound Transit 3, or we're going to invest in our rail system, our light rail system. And next level up, well, that's going to help us really move around a little quicker. Next level up reduces my stress, and then improves my well-being. You saw that on the mind map. Look at how that plays in a conversation. It really changes how we talk about issues of infrastructure improvement. Who would ever talk about the fact that it allows us to be better parents and have dinner with our families, which is in fact what it's all about, unless you had such a mind map? And this is the kind of conversation you could have with this research. It's quite different than you might have had before you sort of had that mind map and knew the research. We want to eat dinners with our families, but traffic has wreaked havoc with our commutes. Now our kids are eating before we get home. Good public transit options would get us home earlier and take away the stress, knowing kids do better in school when families eat together. Now that's not maybe the message you would have first devised, but with this kind of research, we now have that tool. You can do the same, of course, with scenic beauty. If we were going to invest in a new bond issue for open space, for instance, you can do the same kind of mapping on scenic beauty and go through the same process. If you're going to invest in a bond issue, we live in an amazing place. We can wake to Mount Rainier, hike in the Cascades, and return home to a sunset over the Olympics. The water, mountain, trees in our urban parks are not only beautiful, they provide a healthier lifestyle and well-being for us all. I probably could have done better with that, but you get a sense. With this information, we can really connect on these issues of growth in a way we weren't able to before. So, okay, I've talked to you quickly about how our citizens are feeling generally, how they're feeling about growth, and what they particularly like about where they live and what they find are being real problems, what we might do about it, and certainly how we talk about it. I'm going to spend 5 minutes just mentioning what Forterra, one NGO, one small organization, is doing with this information. First, again, it reinforces we need to preserve why we're all here, the great outdoors. So you see us doing more and more conservation work where we're securing our farmland forever and putting new farmers on that farmland so it continues to provide food and fiber. Our citizens love the outdoors. If we're going to grow in our cities, we got to grow up and not out. We need to make these opportunities available. You will continue to see us preserve massive, if you will, large open spaces for hiking and for recreation. If we're going to live in cities and expect ourselves to live in cities, our citizens say they love the outdoors, we need to provide it. And that's local too. The Carbon River Corridor, my colleague, who's somewhere in the back, Jordan Rash, is busy working to conserve the Carbon River Corridor, 11,000 acres right outside of Tacoma, to provide that breathing space, that recreation. And then we can legitimately build our cities. But it's more than just the outside. We just saw that. It's about our communities, the city itself. So it's about how we make our cities available for everyone, cities for all. And here's some work we're doing. I never know how to talk about this one. Usually it's so wonky. But we've developed this really interesting program to literally take the development value, the conversion value of our farms and forest lands. If you develop that land, what would a farmer or forester get for the development? There's a certain amount of value there. Bring that value, call that a development right, and bring it into our cities to allow our cities to build more robustly. Allow developers to build those, to buy those, the right to develop farmland, bring it into the cities and exercise it there, build more robustly there where we should develop. The farmer sees his land paid for, that development value paid for, he or she can continue to farm it, but they get compensated for that development value, and our cities are built more robustly. So that's called a transferable development right program, and what it leads to is that our farms and forests are permanently conserved while we build our cities more robustly, and the farmers and foresters are dealt with fairly. They see compensation by selling their development rights into the city. And cities get even better because we put density where it needs to go. There's that density word again. And I could talk about the tax increment financing provisions, but we'll leave that to another day, okay? What we also have at Forterra is, if we're going to be sustainable and we're going to build our cities need to be for everyone. Every voice needs to be heard on how we develop our cities. So we really enfranchise everyone, and we really strengthen and broaden the social license. So you see Forterra spending more and more time within our communities with interpreters and other cultural experts to really have conversations with new immigrant communities and old established communities about how we should grow, how we should build our cities more, I'll use this word again, more densely, in a way that makes sense to our citizens. So we maintain that social license and broaden it across everyone. So here's our newest venture, and I was trying to explain it to some friends earlier today, and let me see how I do with you. If you think about the economy, and if we're going to do our work as Forterra, we need to be able to buy real estate in our cities and make sure it's deployed the way it should be, whether it's for affordable housing, whether it's for community centers or whatever. We need to be able to make our cities places we want to grow, not just conserve the outdoors, but make our cities spectacular. So how does Forterra do that? Well, we can rely on philanthropy, and thank God we have very generous philanthropists, and that really helps Forterra do its work. But philanthropy is never going to be a big part of the economy. We won't be able to get to scale making our cities spectacular if we just rely on philanthropy. We could talk about government and their programs that we can partner with to really help to make our cities great. It's very slow, it's cumbersome, and we're not going to get to scale. Where our economy really has firepower, if you will, has wealth, is of course in the private sector. So if we're going to make our cities really what they need to be, if Forterra is going to be a meaningful partner in how we develop our cities, we need to figure out how to access capital. As an NGO, we need to figure out how to access capital and reinvest it in our cities. And that's what we're doing. We have started the Forterra Strong Communities Fund. And it's an investment fund with a return, not just to the capital, but of interest. We are raising money right now in the Forterra Strong Communities Fund. That will be an investment, not a gift. And we will use that to buy property for ultimate use for important civic building issues like affordable housing, civic spaces, places for small businesses, and other ways we make our cities great that the market doesn't do as well a job as you might otherwise hope. We will use these funds to invest deeply into certain neighborhoods and really saturate a neighborhood where we might be buying land for workforce housing land for a pocket park, land for affordable housing, and land for a community benefit like a community center. So we really, really turnkey the whole neighborhood, but make sure it remains affordable and not gentrified. This is a wonky slide, and I probably won't go into this in great detail, but because of the way this fund is structured, we will be able to retain this property, turn this land into community value, and maintain the capital investment of our investors and return it after 10 years. So this is an organization, all this boils down to two things. This is an organization that is deeply committed to this region and saying we have to be sustainable over the long run, and that means our cities need to attract growth and be welcoming to everybody, and we need to conserve everything outside our cities. And then we will be very successful as a region. We need to do that and be very innovative. This is a region of innovation. We need to be innovative and figure out how to use the capital markets and the wealth that's being generated in this community to pour back into these cities to make them all they can be. This is an organization that did this survey and is really looking and studying the results and trying to respond to that survey in a way to maintain the social license of this region to grow within our cities and be all we can be. So here's what it comes down to. We all know this street. We all have this street in our neighborhoods, right? Where it's underdeveloped, some great old building stock, but it's not what it should be. Today, it's not what it should be. You know, buildings lost, mostly a very car-oriented place. Now, we could walk away after this conversation today. We could walk away and just sort of leave this on its own. And that's what it's going to look like, all right? It's going to densify a bit, but it's not going to serve our kids or anyone other than maybe some traffic. That's if we leave it on our own devices. But if we really listen to if we pay attention to what we learned in the survey, and we become very innovative, as we've been talking about today, and whether it's little NGOs finding ways to access capital markets, and we can expect more from government, and developers are figuring out how to do this right, there's no reason why we can't be this, right? And this is about 5 times the density of this. So we can grow, we can densify, and really create a strong city that is really welcoming to everybody, I think. So thank you very much. I'm open for questions.
The University of Washington is one of the largest landowners in Seattle, and I know this campus has some land that they own. Is Forterra? Oh, I'm Cameron from the Urban Studies program. I know the University of Washington owns land in Seattle and Tacoma. What is there a relationship between Forterra and the universities for a solution for affordable housing?
Do you want to answer that? I think you're asking a question, an honest question, and a good question. And it's going to be a challenge, particularly as this university grows. This is a great campus. But how are we going to be able, as a community, make sure that is housing here for students? That's something that Forterra has been having conversations with different folks. We hardly have that. We're a little organization. We hardly have an answer there yet. But it's one that I know that needs to be paid attention to, and it looks like there's somebody here with the answer.
I don't have the answer. I have a question.
Okay. Sorry. Is that right? Okay.
All right. I live a split life. I'll start off with that. My name's Mel Tremblay. I'm Director of Planning here at UW-T. I'm also the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Buckley. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Pierce County Regional Council. And we've been really struggling in PCRC with the urban islands. And it's
the urban
islands, the Bonnie Lakes, the Tahilas, Buckley, Enumclaw, all of us in East Pierce County. Because GMA 25 years ago, and you made the statement that I'm going to challenge, that the first option for density is up. Our communities, and even now I'm starting to hear it up here at 6th Avenue, is that up is not the lifestyle or the scene that the folks that chose to live in these cities want. They want views of the mountains. They want to be successful. They want to have some of this, but this density is more horizontal. It's not vertical, right? You're increasing the density. You're not necessarily going up. As our mayor said, we don't even have a 30-foot ladder in our fire truck, okay? So that's not the answer for us. And what our community wants is kind of that semi-rural lifestyle, that small community where everybody goes to the post office, you know your neighbor, you're familiar with the neighbor, you feel safe, we have good parks, but it's not a vertical growth. And because as we grow, we need more money. To me, it's more about how do we aggregate some of these smaller cities into a viable business model? Because, for instance, the town of South Prairie right now cannot meet UGA.
I think we had a rule that everybody has to have a question.
Okay, my question is,
All right.
how do we change it so the urban islands and those who make the choice that to live in a more horizontal community do not have to be forced to go up?
Yeah. Well, I can quibble with a lot of your words like forced and all that. And by the way, we have a project out in your neck of the woods in Buckley. We worked with you on some properties. You're a great community, and we love our partnership with you. So thank you for that. It's a great community. When I said up and not out, that's a quick way to say if we're going to build in our cities, we got to show our residents they don't get sprawled too. But you're right. This is not highly vertical. This is more vertical than the first slide. It's 2 or 3 stories, right? But that's what you got to hear in this conversation. We're not, I don't think anyone here would ever suggest that there needs to be a 13-story residential building in Buckley. This is about scale. It's also about saying we are going to grow within our cities. And we have to take on that mandate. But if we do, how do we do it in a way that it's affordable and maintain a quality of life so people want to live there? This is about being incentivizing, attracting the growth. This is not about dictating the growth. That's what you saw in all this and what we heard from our citizens.
My name is David Frisha. I'm curious as to how Forterra could encourage the citizenry to pay for and the public officials actually fund lifestyle. I mean, Pierce County has a Parks and Recreation plan that, if fully implemented, would cost in excess of $380 million. And right now, the Parks and Recreation Fund gets barely $3 million a year. And most of that goes to maintenance. I mean, there are no trails. We're not doing anything to increase the
So the
health
question,
and safety.
tell me what your question is, sir. And let me
Well,
try
the
my best.
question is how does Forterra encourage the average citizen to recognize that the future is denser city dwelling and recreational trails and forest farmland conserved to enjoy? How do you reconcile the daily bread issue?
The daily, you mean that we're all strapped financially and this costs money, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we're active in that because we do a lot of conservation, 250,000 acres. And and it really we can take you through the economics. But to conserve that land is a lot cheaper on the public wheel than to see it go into low density development. So in the long run, this is a much more efficient way to live. In the long run. And there are a lot of upfront competing capital costs. And you don't expect any of that to be paid for until you have a strong conversation with your citizens, design it together and make a case for it, and then you have to ask to invest in your communities. So what I think I hear you saying is our worst enemy is our history and that we haven't done it right. And so we have to demonstrate to our citizens we can do it right. and then go back and secure the funding to continue to do it right. But we have to demonstrate to our citizens that we can build these communities, that we can conserve the land, and really build the kind of region we want. If we succeed at, and it's a hard job, if we can succeed at that, we will be sustainable. And then there's a fellow up here too. Oh, not this rabble-rouser. Oh, man.
I'll talk fast. My name is Lloyd Federday. I live in Tacoma. In Tacoma, we've had a kind of a recent success, I would call it, in the Proctor district in north central Tacoma, old part of Tacoma, where multifamily was fit into an area, increased the density without doing, I would think, without doing any damage to the community. How do you replicate that in other parts of Tacoma and Lakewood, which are our big urban areas, and get away from kind of low-density strip mall type of development, which we are plagued with in other parts of this city and Lakewood, in my opinion. And how do we do that? I also have a statement, and that's, we were talking about trails. I would kind of remind you, Forterra paid for a portion of the Foothills Trail, which is a bike trail in East Pierce County.
It's a great trail. I mean, it's going to be a great facility. It's exactly, as we grow, it's exactly the kind of facilities that need to be supplied. So you're asking me, there's a lot of other experts, and Lisa just left, but Ali's there, on how we produce that kind of product you had in Proctor elsewhere around the city. And that's a complicated question. First, you have to have some examples, some that we can point to, and thank God for the one in Proctor. So we got to have some successes. Then you got to look at your regulation. You got to work with your development community. You got to really structure the financing so that that kind of new development is financeable. And there's a lot of financing difficulty with bringing a new product to market. You got to work with the community, because communities, as we all know, have been burned a few times. You got to work with your communities so that they recognize the value of this kind of development. So you know this like I know this. First, you get your information, you understand your information, then you need to work with your communities and hit those barriers to growing right and tackle those barriers, which is what we're trying to do. Is that a part of, is that a response? Okay.
I have two questions, and I'll try to make them really quick. The first one is, can you tell us where in the world is there anything like we're talking about? And secondly, you did mention anything about natural disasters.
Natural what?
Disasters.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing the last word. Oh, disasters?
Yes.
Yeah.
And and though I agree with you that this is the most beautiful place in the world to live, probably, I think we do have to somehow fit the natural disaster, the big one, in there somewhere. And I'd like to know how you thought of that, or if you thought of it.
Well, so yes, a lot of big hairy questions, right? So first on examples. First, I'd submit to you that we cannot be captured by history. And if you can't find a perfect case model in anywhere else in the world, that means that you're ahead of the curve maybe, and not just wrong. If you look at some European cities, Denmark and Scandinavia and other cities, they are far ahead of us in how they do this right and how they conserve their external landscape. There are examples out there that this country can learn from quite a bit, and they're available. Now, in disasters, I'm a little bit behind the curve, flat-footed on how I incorporate disasters into this. I think about climate change, and the best response to climate change is one where we leave most of our landscape open to function and live as efficiently as we can, and that's within our cities and communities like Buckley. That's our most efficient way of living and the most resilient way to face climate change. And the population increase we can expect from climate refugees coming here. We're going to have a lot of people moving here, and we need to provide for that, and the way we provide for it is making our cities eminently livable. So there's one long-term disaster this is the way to best confront. If we're talking about seismic issues, I best leave that to structural engineers. But that would be an issue that we would look to them to to provide. So I'm not sure I can respond well to natural disasters.
Hi, I'm Anna Sierra, and I'm a psychologist, community psychologist and a clinical psychologist. So I really appreciate you putting the narrative with the numbers and the thoughtfulness behind this. I also have lived in Proctor or near Proctor for a long time. I appreciate Lloyd's opinion, but I would not hold that up as a model. The communication has been very poor, and perhaps people are pleased with the result, but there's a substantial percentage of residents that are not. And I think the process was not geared towards the community. In fact, the community was largely excluded. So I think this process would be very helpful. So if you were to address the developers, the city council, and citizens together to create a template for creating communities that are inclusive of everyone, what does that process exactly look like? I mean, this is a template, but when the rubber meets the road, how do you actually engage the community so people don't feel left out 5, 10 years later? Because we don't want to see these errors replicated. And I think that in our community and other communities, neighborhoods throughout Tacoma, I think that density is welcomed, but people want to have a voice and know that their safety concerns, their concerns for their elders, and concerns for their neighbors as well as themselves are taken into account.
So,
and I can clearly see that you've given a lot of thought to that, and I appreciate that. But we have some serious errors that have been made in this non-process. We don't want to see this repeated. Thank you.
So I appreciate your comments on Floyd. Of course, I appreciate your views on this too. I'm not an expert in process, and there's some developers in this audience who've done process quite well. But the one thing that Forterra has learned, and anytime, and change oftentimes brings discomfort, even if down the road folks embrace the change. I'm a change expert. Yeah, okay, well, you know, we bought and converted rail lines to trails. And you'd think that would be an easy one, and we've had so much opposition, so we've just learned change is very uncomfortable. And all Forterra has ever learned, and they're experts, and I don't have the right, I don't have any, you know, real platform to speak about your issue, but what Forterra's learned is you need to start early, way early in a conversation, sort of trust the public to be smart enough to even if they're not supportive, at least understand your issue. If you, as you see in the slide, you speak to them head on. Start early, have honest conversations about the facts, don't hide the ball, and just stay with it. And that's what we've learned to enable a community to change. But there is a lot, as you know, and there's probably a lot of research right in this institution to have these productive conversations about how a community changes itself.
Thank you.
Tell my wife. I'll pay it.
Hey. Nick Watkins here. So I had a question about how you can really begin to effectively have diverse income levels in neighborhoods. I think it's something that both Seattle and Tacoma are not doing very well. Right. You know, you've got the example of, you know, the Proctor neighborhood it's a very nice neighborhood. It's walkable. It's great. You know, the problem is you don't have people in the lower income levels that can afford to live in a place like that. So on the other end of the spectrum, you have like the Lincoln district where you've got, food deserts. People can't walk to grocery stores and those types of things. So how do you begin to, develop in a more responsible way that allows for more of a diverse income level, I guess?
So I don't think Forterra would ever say that we need to change every neighborhood. I think what Forterra, and we're not experts, we did this research, but we do have our opinions. And you asked me. So I think what Forterra would say is, first of all, from the research, it demonstrates that particularly all children do better in income diverse neighborhoods. They just do better, and they understand the world better. So what Forterra is doing about it is developing this fund to invest in communities to make sure we have mixed housing. Not just housing of one income class, but mixed housing. If you look at different organizations, and I think this is true that the Tacoma Housing Association, is certainly true of the Seattle Housing Association, is they're building very innovative mixed income neighborhoods. The whole Yesler Terrace, huge part of Seattle, is being redeveloped for mixed income housing, from high end to subsidized. So there are some really terrific attempts or projects going on to do that. And our fund, in our own way, we're hoping to contribute to that mixed income approach. But that doesn't need to be every neighborhood. We just need to have that choice readily available, right?
I'm Pete Moran. I really enjoyed this series. My question is, what about the imprint of 10, 20, 30 years out on these kind of studies and projects? Has that been studied out so they don't decrease, like strip malls are dead after 15 years, some residential areas are completely gone out downhill, or you got stores that are built but there's no base to customers to buy the goods? Do you do studies on that, on the imprint?
So what is most interesting about what happened in the recession is that our denser communities, the real estate in our denser communities maintained value, and it was the shopping centers and all that struggled and are not returning to value. So there's a sort of ongoing study on real estate values right in front of our noses there. Have there been 30-year longitudinal studies on the economic longevity of different development? Yeah, there has been. Do I have it with me? No.
Thanks. I still think of you as the Cascade Land Conservancy, so my brain hasn't shifted to the urban interest. I guess my question would be, what is Forterra looking for in urban environments to invest in? What's an ideal project for you guys in an urban setting?
Yeah, and every time I step outside my door, I have this conversation about Cascade Land Conservancy versus our name Forterra. And so let me just cut back a little bit on that. We are still deeply invested in conserving our ex-urban landscape. This Saturday, I'll be spending my day negotiating on a 15,000-acre ranch, which has mountain sheep and sage grouse habitat. It's spectacular. But if we're really going to be sustainable, again, we've got to create these magnets for growth we call cities where we all enjoy living as we conserve the rest of the environment, or as we conserve these other spaces. I think that's the only ethical thing for us to do, is to make sure we're as deeply ingrained where people live and not just where people visit. So that's our philosophy. Now on investments, we have a set of criteria that have been developed over time under the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation and others to really help us understand where to best invest to sort of be these turnkey real estate investments in emergent neighborhoods. And we then have a board of real estate advisors around us to help us determine where to invest. And we're tiny. I mean, we're just tiny. But we look for strong partners in terms of strong other advocacy nonprofits to partner with. And then we look at strategic real estate investments to help turnkey neighborhoods. And there's all this fancy criteria behind it. And I can get you the criteria if you want to see the investment criteria.
Hi, my name is Joanne. I just have a quick question. Is Forterra accepting or encouraging any foreign investors?
We wouldn't have a particular philosophy on that. That if a foreign investor as opposed to a local investor in a fund, I don't think we have a particular issue with that. It's how we use the money, I think, not where it comes from.
Getting close to the last question here. So.
Hi.
I am.
I know.
My name is Susan, and can I ask two questions? Sort of.
Oh, snuck in under the wire.
Well, actually, one of the questions is just like a yes or no. And basically, it has to do with when you're talking about the swapping to save farmland to trade off with investors. Is that kind of like when they would take wetlands and recreate a new wetland for development?
I don't.
Not really?
I mean, maybe I'm too nuanced about it. I wouldn't say it's the same thing.
Okay.
That's a no.
Okay. But my question
And I'm happy to talk more about it at the break if you want. Yeah.
In your graphic up there, your conceptual drawing,
This one?
you have the higher apartment-looking properties that look like they're maybe 8 stories. I don't know how tall. How do you envision the back side of this street to look? What's on the back side of these buildings? Is it housing? Is it more? Because the streetscape here looks quite nice, but I'm just curious if you have a vision for how a developer would finish the back side of those tall buildings.
That's a tough question.
How is it transitioning, I guess?
You know, a city's two-dimensional. It's not linear, so you'd expect the same application of design principles, front side, back side. It's a two-dimensional, it's a grid. It's not just, you know, it's not a stage set, right?
Yeah.
All right, I don't think we should take take Proctor as the one, you know, as their one-on-one exact same. Say what?
The backside of the Proctor district is a farmer's market.
Yeah. I can finish it up with a comment. Well, I think what we are hearing here is the whole issue of design review process.
Oh, there you go.
Which has to be done. And this is something that I think this community and other communities gradually will be discussing. So it's difficult for Gene to talk about a conceptual drawing that there's no specific neighborhood that's like that to talk to you about what the back of it looks like. So I think it's important that as we think about Proctor, Lincoln, and all the other places to think about design review process the same way we talk about planning process itself. With that, I want to thank you for a wonderful conversation and remind you that there's a reception there. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you on the other side of these doors for conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You were great. Thank you.